So welcome back to the Mike Oldfield podcast after a very, very long hiatus. Markus just reminded me that it was actually somewhere around January that we did the last episode. It's been a busy year for both of us. And so for that reason, we decided to go with Islands as the next installment, although chronologically speaking, the Killing Fields would have been next, for my personal opinion, because it's also related to a very interesting movie. I suggested maybe skipping that one for the moment because it needs a little bit more preparation time, at least on my end, and go with Islands next. Interesting album for me, always one I've been I've had a difficult relationship with. After the Discovery tour, Mike withdraws. It's according to his own statement, that tour was the biggest stadium tour of the year. So huge, 50 dates across Europe and probably internationally, and takes a little bit of time off from making music. And then in 1987 returns with Islands, which, after the very, very experimental Killing Fields, returns to somewhat more accessible waters. As I said, I could probably talk a very long time. I have very mixed feelings about this album, but maybe Markus, you can now take over and tell me a bit about your overall view of the record.
So first of all, I think it's one of the most important Mike Oldfield albums for me, very interestingly, because first of all, I really think it's a great album, and I'm especially talking about as you know, always from the composition side of things, and also from the development within the musical biography of the artist, let's say, right? And there's something really amazing going on here in terms of the sound, the arrangements. I'm particularly talking about the wind chimes, obviously a part 2, which is maybe one of his most complex compositions. Actually, there is Amarok, which is more complex. But the wind chimes is up there, and I like this idea, and this is a theme that we'll get to more as we progress in this discography, that the wind chimes, which are the mini tubular bells, right? I just like the tongue-in-cheekness of that whole idea, and it's just a fascinating album to me. And actually, me being a musician myself, I played 3 of these songs. I made 2 covers of this Islands. I covered Islands with a few friends, and I covered The Time Has Come on my Christmas album, Comet. Mm-hmm. And also as a 16, 17-year-old, I played the Wind Chimes Part 1 live on stage with my friend George, both playing keyboards. We made an arrangement, because the parts are so simple and so.
If you had said you played part 2, that would have been.
Yeah, that would be some. But we did at a school, like a performance at the school on a big theater stage. So I really feel a lot of connection with that album, and obviously we'll go into details. Also, I played with one of the musicians who's on this record, Björn Jason Lind. Whose music I really thoroughly recommend to Mike Oldfield fans, because he was a great melody writer. And
interesting.
He has amazing records. Unfortunately, he died a few years ago. But I played with him, and he played one of my pieces, Mariola, with me. He was in the band for that. So anyway, great album. We have the side 1 instrumental, side 2 songs again, which is the formula that Crisis had.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's not like 5 Miles Out, which also had the instrumentals on the second side. It's not like Discovery, who only had that short instrumental at the end, the 12th minute, The Lake. So this is now back to the Crisis formula in a way. And sonically, this record, I think, sounds just amazing. And it was the time of like some sort of Dolby noise reduction. So in a way, it was the highest point in evolution of analog recording technology. I think that Earth Moving was already digitally recorded.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure, but so Islands has a fantastic sound. The mix is so incredibly detailed. Like the panning of all the parts is so detailed. It's just an incredible record in terms of technical achievement, I would say. And there are co-producers on, I think, almost all the tracks. Maybe with the exception of North Point and Flying Start. I think there are co-producers.
Flying Start, wasn't that with
Let me see. No, produced by Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, North Point produced by Mike Oldfield, and obviously When the Night's on Fire, which on the German CD edition was a bonus track, but it's not listed as a bonus track. It's just track 7 on the CD. It wasn't on the vinyl, and it was never released in the US.
In a way that is interesting, of course, because it's the it's sort of the seed for the entire B-side in a way, and even yeah, it's the seed.
Yeah, I mean,
the way I understand it, he worked on this for months and months to get that piece right, and in the process of getting it right, he essentially created Islands and.
Actually, as far as I know, because you know those demo versions, right?
I haven't heard them.
You haven't heard them?
No.
Yeah, so there's a version of Islands where When the Night's on Fire is actually the chorus.
Yeah.
So
I read about it,
yeah. So I wouldn't be 100% sure what came first. You know, I would think it was Islands because there's a Barry Palmer version of it as well. When the Night's on Fire, but the song is Islands. It's very interesting. But yeah, co-producers, right? So on the Wind Chimes Part 2, that's Simon Phillips again. So just like on Discovery and Crisis. Then Islands is co-produced by Tom Newman and Alan Shacklock. Interesting combination there. And Magic Touch with Jeff Downs.
Yeah.
And you know there are other like connections to that back then Asia and what was the name of the band? GTR.
GTR, yeah.
GTR.
Where Max Bacon also came from.
Yeah, Max Bacon and Phil Spalding, obviously, who is also on this record. The Time Has Come with Michael Cretu.
That's going to be very important for the 90s.
Yes.
That
yes.
connection.
Yes. So it's a really, really interesting record, I think. Like I say it again, compositionally, sonically, also the way the collaborations have worked. It's more of a how should I say this? Like more of an 80s kind of style of where you have different producers come together to make a record. And then like the one most striking thing is that this is the first record where Anita Hegerland was very present, like in the Wind Chimes as like
It's the choir.
he sampled her voice and stuff like that, and she sings 2 songs, North Point and The Time Has Come, and When the Night's on Fire as well, if we want to see that as a main track also. And we have guest vocalists that are, you know, in the case of Bonnie Tyler, famous, successful singers at that time. And Mike kind of reaching back into his past, you know, working with Kevin Ayers.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll get into that. But somehow that song, Flying Start, is also like the lyrics of that song really are interesting in that regard, like looking back at the time with the whole world. And yeah, so that's what I have to say right now. And but it's funny that you mentioned Max Bacon, because as you know, like in the European version, Max Bacon is not singing Magic Touch.
It's weird.
Jim Price.
It's the wrong way around. Even though I have to admit, I find probably in a blindfolded, being blindfolded, I don't think I'd instantly be able to tell the two apart. I think they're very close. Interesting choice. Interesting how he got to realize two different versions with two different singers with different backgrounds and making them sound very similar in feeling.
To me, it doesn't come as a surprise. I actually prefer the Jim Price version. It's not a surprise to me because of the writing style of Mike, and especially the track Magic Touch is kind of an awkward kind of little thing how it's written, like with these syncopated chord changes, and which is kind of cool. I mean, I still think it's not a bad song, but it's just really odd, and I think the melodies are so specific that if you take two guys singing that song, there's not going to be that much of a difference.
Maybe.
And also their voices are pretty close anyway. And I prefer Jim Price's singing on this one because it seems a little it gels better with the backing track to me.
Yeah, he is he has less melodrama in there in the voice. I think.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Maybe that's a good point to start. I'm just curious, in your opinion, there's we talked about this very briefly before we hit the record button. There are two slightly different versions of this. There's the American version and the international version. And you pointed out that the American version is also, I believe, the one used for the vinyl pressing. So the American version has a different track order on the B side. Do you have a preference?
I mean, like for me, obviously, because I had the European version, I prefer that.
Okay, I massively prefer the American one.
Okay, wow. What's the first song on the second side?
Magic Touch.
Oh, really? Okay.
None of these, by the way, put Flying Start as the first track on the B side, which I would have probably put, not just because of the name, but I think that would have been a good start for that side. But it's Magic Touch for the American version.
Okay, so I think that Magic Touch was the single at that point, and it even charted in the US.
Yeah.
So I think that's the reason why they put that as the first track on that
agree.
side.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of like thinking, as a composer, I'm sure that Mike wanted to bookend side 2 with Islands and When the Night's on Fire.
Makes sense.
So yeah, I mean, what really struck me as interesting was that, at least I don't know about the US version, but in the European version, the wind chimes part 1 and 2 are one track, even on the CD. So I was always a little bit sad about that because I wanted to skip the first part and just go to the cool piece, and I couldn't just skip.
I wonder is that a technical thing? There's something similar, even though more obvious on Earth Moving, the final track of Earth Moving.
Yeah, that's a mystery. That's a big mystery why that is the case.
That is even weirder.
Yeah, that is super weird. Like, we're gonna talk about that next time. But yeah, like why are these two tracks? Anyway, like there's, as you know, there's something also very important. There's the video album called The Wind Chimes.
Super important.
Yes, which is part of this whole, and we should have said that first, actually, that this music wasn't written just as music, but with the visuals at the same time. We worked on those at the same time. So it's obviously the video product of its time with the technological possibilities.
State of the art in the 1980s.
But I mean, I've watched the video again for the Wind Chimes Part 2, or also Wind Chimes Part 1, the whole thing, with my daughter, and when she was 3 or something, and it was fascinating to see like the symbolism and the. So it's not so much about what it looks like, but the story or the impressions you made, the meaning of the symbols. This is something we haven't talked much about in Mike's music, but I think there is a lot of symbolism. And once he got his hands on visual technology, it started with we haven't mentioned the singles that got released in between Discovery, but we're going to get to those as well. But he first did the video for Pictures in the Dark, and then he made the one for Shine, and then we ended up with this album Islands and the video album The Wind Chimes.
Yeah, there's an interview on Spanish TV where he speaks very briefly about the video project, and he says, and it almost gets lost in the video, like it's almost a side thought in the interview, but he says, I wanted to give people an insight into what goes on in my mind when making music. And then you watch the video, and it actually, if you look at it from that perspective, it's super revealing. I think it's super revealing. As you mentioned the word symbolism, I actually put that down. I said, to me, it's clear that he has to have an idea of using music as symbols. The way he puts it together. So there's different elements which come up in during the video, which sort of fly around in virtual reality space, and then at the end they all come together. So visually, it replicates what he does musically in these final moments, bringing things together. And there's it's super cool in one of the videos. I think it's North Point. There's a passage where in the video an old castle is assembled from different elements. So the castle assembles, and then it opens up again, and you fly through the open window, and then behind it there's a seagull. And the moment the seagull comes into the picture, the guitar actually makes a seagull noise.
Yes, exactly.
I think these are not coincidences. I think this is very. It's actually what he says he did. He actually created a visual experience of his artistic mind.
And the seagull moment is also very unique, because it's the only time that I can think of in his music where he's putting the minor and major tonality at the same time, where the chord is major and the seagull is the flat 3, and it's really, really jarring kind of sound, even in the context of such a simple song. It's funny that you picked out that moment.
It's so striking.
Yes, it's very striking, and I mean there's a lot to this album, and I see you brought a lot of notes.
Actually, it's part of it is just lyrics I copied, and also there's a passage from the Wikipedia about the what they call the Balinese monkey dance, which is part of the Wind Chimes. Even though I prefer maybe to start with the B-side, as you mentioned, minor and major, one of the things which would be interesting for me to hear you talk about is the Magic Touch, the guitar solo in Magic Touch. So we have Magic Touch, as I said, it's an interesting, curious composition.
Yeah.
It gets even more curious to me in the guitar solo, because the guitar solo, I'm a Morbid Angel fan, and to me, sort of the guitar solo has this lava liquid structure that Trey Isakforth uses in his death metal. It's really interesting. That guitar solo, is that as strange as it sounds, or is it maybe just
no?
Because it's so fast.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's not. I love it. I think it's a great solo, but it's somewhat, you can see that it's a part that he very deliberately wrote. So for me, it's sort of an extension of the solo in Discovery, in the song Discovery, and the solo in Shine, and the single Shine with John Anderson, right?
Which is not part of the album, interesting.
Which is not part of any album, right? So that's why this solo, to me, even though I like it a lot, but it feels a little bit too deliberate to me. And in order to play something that it's like I said the same for the Discovery solo and Shine, which we haven't talked about. It's a mini composition in itself. Like it has the complexity of a whole song within like a 10 to 20 second span. And I like it. It is fast. He's kind of showing off in a way. But interestingly enough, it loses a little bit, and maybe that's what you're referring to, loses a little bit of his trademark kind of sound, because he's stretching out, which I admire. At the same time, it takes away a little bit from the Oldfieldness of all things, but it's obviously still nobody else could have come up with that part.
In that song,
in that song, exactly. No, it's a very interesting composition. Also, we spoke about Jim Price or Max Bacon singing the main lead vocal, but there's the outro. It's magic, it's magic, it's magic, right? Which is sung by Anita Hegerland, the female voice in there. I'm not sure if you remember that. It's sort of like a fade out. Feels like it could fade out, and then it actually stops, and you get a little bit of these synth chords at the end, which are referencing back the beginning of, it's the same sound of the beginning of the Wind Chimes Part 2.
Yeah, there were elements.
Yeah, so you can see like they are like cross references, like all the. I'm not exactly sure now, but I would say all of the motifs from the songs make an appearance in the Wind Chimes Part 2.
Or the other way around. I'm curious. How I believe he did the Wind Chimes first, but that's probably all at the same time.
I at the same time. Yeah, for sure.
I agree. I actually thought this while on the way here on the
train.
On the train, yeah. But when I look for the German, for the S-Bahn. I think, to me, I believe he's thinking in these things, lots like intervals and relations more than I would say. Just as a regular mortal, I would probably say, so this is a similar melody, but I don't think he thinks that way. So, for example, the opening to the Wind Chimes, the Wind Chime theme introduced in Wind Chimes Part 1, in a way that at the end, there's this beautiful passage which, with the guitar, da, 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 and it has a similar interval structure. It's not the same melody, not exactly, because he picks up the original theme at the very end, but the intervals are the same, and it's also on The Time Has Come, I believe, of the Nights of Fire. So even if it's not a verbatim quote, I think to him that connection, he establishes that connection on a sort of a very subtle level all across the album.
And the albums.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, no, like he's always been more than anybody understands, I think.
Yeah.
So also, like in terms of the composition, like these are traditional techniques of classical or like whatever contemporary at that time composition, where you would make variations of themes, you would invert the interval structure, you would do all these manipulations to the material to come up with new ideas, and he does that here in a very big way. And like the reference here, like I said, the wind chimes as like a mini Tubular Bells, that's what he's doing, literally doing in this piece. So the Wind Chimes Part 1 is sort of the equivalent to the beautiful melody, Tubular Bells, after the first, 5 minutes, after the swelling organ chord. So where you have the simple 3 major chords melody, right? That's what the Wind Chimes is. That is that section of Tubular Bells, right? If we, I think pretty much we can look at sections of this and say, okay, this is a variation of that section of Tubular Bells, and I think this is kind of like a cool thing again, where he's sort of meta, in a way, getting completely meta about making music, as somebody who is a very inspired guy, to also, so he's not just emotionally connected and close to like coming up with parts on the acoustic guitar, let's say, or on the keyboard, but he would actually also zoom out and work as a worker, if you could say, as a music worker. And I find that fascinating that, okay, so there's that connection to Tubular Bells, but then that Wind Chimes Part 1 theme is also one of the main themes in Amarok. It is one of the main themes in Amarok. Like after the first crescendo, we get that theme. So it's quite fascinating. Also, like the finale of Tubular Bells of side 1, with the repeated 16th like bass line stuff. We get that mirrored in the Wind Chimes Part 2 as well at the end. And it's really, yes, I think it's a really fascinating composition. Also, he's using all sorts of interesting time signatures that he hasn't used before, and there are some triplety things in there which he hasn't done much before, and there's like this swing in 5/4, and it's really special. And you know, visually, like talking about so for example, Flying Start, there is the motif of the what do you call it? Like where they with the arena where they fight the bulls or whatever. And what's that called again? Come on, like bullfighting, right? So the bullfighting imagery, it appears in Flying Start, and it also appears in the Wind Chimes Part 2, where that theme is being used. So he is very clearly, deliberately collaging these elements.
He there's the sections, the way they're called also in the longer pieces, they have a very sort of a narrative, always a narrative aspect to them. On the Tubular Bells, on the re-recorded Tubular Bells, they're split apart more clearly, and then you get all these, the way he's thinking about them as storytelling elements.
Yes.
And that's very clear in the video as well, which I saw a lot later. But I think it's in the music. You don't need the visuals, but the visuals are super add a layer that the music may not actually have. Like you're entering a different interpretation, as it were, and it makes you listen to the music differently.
Yeah, and like for me, obviously, like visuals are not important. But anyway, it was sort of like part of the thing back then, and I did get the VHS tape at that time. I had it and I watched it. I listened to this album a lot with my friend George, the guy that we also we performed the Wind Chimes Part 1. And we soaked it up. Like we really looked at every single detail, watched it, and listened to it. I don't know, dozens, hundreds of times, maybe even. And it's sort of in terms of like the overall sound. Let's say, I find that Islands is obviously kind of a standout track, because it's produced very differently. It sounds, I mean, not very differently, but it still fits in with the album, but it is sort of the track that sounds the least organic which is funny, because like I said, I did a cover version of Islands with my friend Lee Fletcher, and Lisa Fletcher was singing, and I looked at all the versions I could find, so I found the demos, and then realizing that the intro, which is in the mix of the release single, is very much, it starts with, what is it, oboe, I guess, and then the guitar playing that lead line, where in the demo, actually the guitar is 4 guitars set like a choral arrangement. It's an actual choral arrangement that I transcribed, and for the cover version, I had a string quartet play it, and the exact arrangement and writing that Mike did of the choral. It's a choral arrangement, and you see like these kinds of details that always play a role in Mike's pieces. When somebody starts to produce it like a song, like a pop song, like a potential hit song, what they do is they dumb it down. I think the parts are still in there, but they are just mixed so quietly that you don't really hear them well.
The sound question is, I found it funny that you mentioned that you think the album sounds great. I'm not sure. I think what I noticed definitely is that there is a difference to the A and the B side. So interestingly, the A side has more synths in there than in many respects. So when you mentioned the oboe on on Magic Touch, that's a real oboe. But I think on the A side, there's lots more of the acoustic instruments are also like synthesized.
I'm not so sure.
They definitely sound that way.
Some of them, and he's always done that he's mixed these things also. But if we look at the list of contributors here, so there's, for example, Raphael Ravenscroft there, who plays the sax solo, I think, in Islands.
Yeah.
Andy McKay is probably the oboist, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And there's like a guest keyboard player, Mickey Simmons.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting to actually have somebody playing keyboards where Mike does play, but not really as a pianist. And I've just find that super interesting, because with this record you don't really know, as you say, you don't really know, is it synthesized, is it real, is it sequenced, is it played?
Yeah.
And what I was referring to with the sound was the sound quality. So I was not referring to the sounds he used, where some of them are super cool and great and absolutely timeless, and others are so much of their time that they're kind of ridiculous in a way. But now, with like looking back, they are super charming still to me. I remember that I had which was like a 100 Deutschmarks keyboard that had one of the sounds that he's using in the wind chimes. And whenever I hear it, I think back at that little Casio keyboard, But no, I think the sound quality is kind of fantastic. And then you're right, there's a difference between first side and second side, and then also between the songs, there is quite a bit of difference depending on which producer.
So one thing I find on the wind chimes, I love the drums. I think the drums are so important for the impact of that music.
Yes.
And on the B side, in my opinion, most of the drum is programmed, and it lends a completely different character to the music. But when you look for sort of the general public's feeling about the album, it's mostly negative. There's a few people who really, really love this album like you do, and then there's lots of people who say it sounds dated, it sounds like the 80s, it's a product of its time, and it's sort of a throwaway album. And the funny thing is, first of all, it's the exact opposite of a throwaway album, and because he really labored over it. So maybe, if anything, it's more too much labored over than sort of written quickly as something on the side. And the other thing is, it doesn't, if you wanted to date it, as you said, there are lots of hints and clues how to date it, which reveal the time it was written in. But this is not an 80s album, in my opinion. It sounds, the 80s did not sound like this. And if you want to get like a taste of what the 80s actually sounded like, for the most part, listen to Kevin Ayer's cover version, or his own version of Flying Start, which he recorded for his own album a year later, Falling Up. That is an 80s album version, which has a really primitive, plodding drum computer beat. And it sounds
funny.
like,
I don't know that version. Interestingly,
it's it sounds like a demo in my opinion.
Okay.
Lots of the Kevin Ayers album from the 80s don't sound that great.
Yeah, he was most unpopular at that time, right?
He had a difficult. I think he was trying to find where he was as a musician. So it still has blues and rock compositional background, but then the instrumentation is mostly electronic. His version is definitely, like, the vocal performance is much stripped down. It's much more passionate on the Island version, and the Island one it sounds like it's like the big movies, and the other one is like a B or C movie. Like, it's like just in the terms of the power of the song.
I have like two other things which are really important to mention about this album. Is it's the only catalog item that is not available these days.
And it's not on streaming.
It's not on streaming, no. some people believe that it is because of this the relationship with, or the non-relationship with, Anita Hegerland. I don't know if that's true. It doesn't. I mean, I have.
I can add another rumor.
Yeah.
Is that there's a, and that one seems more likely to me, is that there is a royalty dispute with the Bonnie Tyler camp over the song Islands.
Oh, really?
I can, and that's one of the reasons why I noted the lyrics, maybe for later. But so that is one, because he, I think he hinted at the fact that this is probably not his favorite album, Mike, but he's not disowned any of his records. So even much later on, so I'm pretty sure it has nothing to do with the fact that he dislikes the album or doesn't want to have it. And why should?
But it's possible, because this may be the record that is the one that reminds him the most of the time with Anita and his children that were born at that time. So it wouldn't surprise me. But then, why is Earth Moving out there? So it's really, I mean, it could also be a hiccup on the record company's side, or maybe the rights were never really cleared. Nobody knows who owns it, or that could be the reason also. Maybe it didn't get mentioned. They forgot to put it in a contract when he was selling his publishing, or something like that. There can be so many things that lead to a situation like this. But anyway, I find it sad, because people need to know the Wind Chimes Part 2. It's showing that he's really the GOAT. I think it's the melodies there, and it's funny because normally he also repeats sections. So you have a theme, and then it gets repeated. It maybe there's a little bit of variation. It's repeated, but here you get like one idea after the other, and it's flowing from one idea into the next. But everything makes sense. The melodies are endless melodies across these sections, and there like some exceptions. They're like the Balinese dance kind of thing, which is where sort of the thematic material is more hidden in the background, and that's the part where the flute, where Björn is doing the flute in the front loud. But it's just compositionally such an important piece, and I wish it would be available for people to check out and understand that it is sort of a pretty much a huge achievement. This, to compose this, to record this, to create this cool sound, and all the details he spent on the mix. Like I said, with the panning, like where you see that, and it was an automized desk. So he really took advantage of all the technical possibilities at that time, and it is sort of, for me, really the piece that made Amarok possible.
That's what I always.
It's the stepping stone. It's the stepping stone to Amarok, and the main themes are in both pieces. So, like you can see, there's a clear relationship. And Amarok, we're going to get to that as well, is like more stream of consciousness.
Yeah, that's
where the Wind Chimes Part 2 is very much thought through and more cohesive.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Probably in a way, I see the actual stepping stone as music from the balcony to Amarok. I see some. Because Music from the Balcony is different to the Wind Chimes, very different.
But Music from the Balcony was, but we don't know when it got recorded, that's true. But it was released after Amarok.
And we don't, that's true.
Yeah.
And we don't actually know, but that's for later, how that piece was done. I have my ideas that maybe it was also as much Tom Newman as Mike, in some respects. Not the musical material, but the way it's put together.
Yes.
Anyway,
yes.
That's for later. The idea that maybe there's a conflict hidden behind the non-appearance on streaming and the fact that the album is not being reprinted currently, or not in print currently, I think
it hasn't been in print for a long time,
very long time. So I think that what lends credibility to that is the fact that the album recording is split in many ways. So we have a core, which is Mike and a few of his most intimate collaborators, and then many of the vocal performances were actually done remotely. So just as an example, Bonnie Tyler was never in the same studio with Mike. The way I understand it, she recorded it in France without him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Max Bacon's, I believe, also was done without him being present. So we have sort of and that is also part of the new 80s technology paradigm, is that you can source your contributions in a completely different way. Of course, today that's even more extreme. So you can assemble it all coming from almost, you don't even have to, you can use existing pieces and then sample it in and so forth. But I think it's a very modern way, but it creates less of a familial, communal sense. Maybe that was maybe more there with an album like Platinum or Crisis, where I think there was actually a band playing in the same room for a lot of the time.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. And you can really tell by the way that the songs on side 2 are put together, that there's never really a bass part, for example, which is sort of interesting. Like, yes, there is a bass, but there are bass frequencies, there are parts that fulfill that role, but there's not like what would be like the total, the normal Mike Oldfield thing would be there's a real part, like, you know, where you could pinpoint, okay, you know, and that's really super unique just to this album.
We don't have anything in Changeling which actually talks about this period. It's so
he's skipping it there as well. So that's why I think it has to do with his recollection of that time, the way he feels about that. But
you make a really good point about the bass part, which actually, I mean, the 80s, I've read a lot about Kraftwerk in the 80s and how they sort of broke recording Electric Cafe. And my idea, my sort of interpretation of the events is that they could not figure out how to bring the new dominating strand in electronic music, which is club music, electronic dance music, how they could take that to their sound. And so they recorded that album, but it was sort of a compromise. They never really finished it in a way. It was eventually released. And now you mentioned that with the bass part. In the video to Islands, Mike is actually playing the bass.
Yes.
And I noticed it because he's really playing a cool bass part, but it's almost like dance music. So I wonder if subconsciously, even though I don't think at that time he was yet raving in Ibiza, that I think came later, maybe he picked up on some of that, because I think it's a strong bass part, but as you say, it's not something that would grow organically.
It's not a part as such. It's playing like boom, 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 right? So it's there are little moments of like motivic, but just really like 3 notes or something like that, which is also very much an Oldfield thing, to do that, to use use bass very sparsely. So again, like, yes, but there's something up with this, you know, on this record. Like even on the Wind Chimes Part 2, the bass is not a prominent element. And as we know, Mike is primarily a bass player. Looking at Discovery, just for a comparison, right? There are actual little bass solos in those songs. So it's interesting. So it's kind of
there are bass moments in the Wind Chimes, but then they end and then they go into the next section.
Yeah, but it's really like a different quality of writing, let's say. I don't mean quality as in good or bad. I mean as in different flavor, different idea, different function also of this. And I mean the Bonnie Tyler question, right? I know the guy who's the musical director for Bonnie Tyler, and I asked him, "Do you ever play Islands live?" And I can't remember his answer right now. I've met him a few times.
But he did
even
answer
this
it.
year. He did answer it, and he said he likes the song. But I have to ask him again. I'm just going to send him an email later. I mean, like if we talk about like royalties for that, this is really in terms of like the truth of, say, composition, right? It's a Mike Oldfield song. There's no, like you can tell, like all his demos that the melodies are totally Mike's melodies. So the question is like, as a performer, what kind of share would Bonnie Tyler get as a performer of that song? And that is a valid question. And I guess that in the real music industry, these things would get negotiated. So there's not usually like a standard how this is done. So I can see that there may be some sort of conflict, but
I look at it from the lyric perspective. I can only guess.
okay.
Clearly, if you look at the Nights on Fire, there are a lot of the lyrical themes, not just the musical themes, but the lyrical themes come up in Islands, the song.
Okay.
Like the birds are in there.
Yes.
And so forth. There's different stuff in there which clearly refers to the islands. But I'm just going to read two passages, one from Islands and one from Flying Start. So this is Islands. When the night's on fire, will you keep the candlelight burning? Hold on to your heart's desire. When you see one bird into the wind, another one's turning, and the two can fly much higher. So that's Islands. I actually think if you read the lyrics, they don't make sense at all, but they're actually poetic. I think they have a poetic power in the song, which really works. So this is Flying Start. We took a place in the sun to see just what had become. The warm wind blows constantly. Does the answer still blow? Did you find your chateau in that Mediterranean fantasy? It has the same structure, but I think the way the rhymes, I don't know. I mean, I don't think Mike's a great sort of a poet. I think his lyrics come sort of from straight from the heart.
Yeah.
And so in a way I feel, but this is a guess only, that the lyrics to Islands were worked on together. Clearly it's there, so the material is there, but I think these lyrics have a different quality. And I had the same feeling with Moonlight Shadow. I think Moonlight Shadow, the lyrics to Moonlight Shadow, they're so different from anything else he's written. And I've read
You
interviews.
mean that they were collaborative with the singers?
I think so. And we have the same issue that Maggie Riley has held a grudge for reasons we don't exactly know against Mike for a long time, despite everything she said to the positive, how great that time was and how much she enjoyed it and how much she actually likes him, but there was a dispute. And I think this one, I just have the idea that there's a collaboration here in some, even a minor.
I agree. That's very, very likely. I also understand that at that time, like if you were the main artist, that was like not a question. Like, yes, maybe you collaborate in the studio, if somebody brings something in, the main artist makes it theirs. It's a little bit like researching at a uni and your professor is going to get the credit, not you, right? It's a little bit like that. You may be right. I know that all the lyrics, I'm not exactly sure because I should have prepared better here, listening to the demos of Islands and the Wind Chimes.
And in the 12-inch, there's more text, actually. I haven't researched that either, but I think there's a section at the end of the 12-inch, the maxi single version.
But it's, and I Need Your Light Tonight is that what she sings there. It's just one line, that's extra. But so we would have to check that. But if anything is with Bonnie, then that would be actually the first lines with Islands, because when the Night's on Fire, that was already there for sure. I mean, like since we're looking at it, I think for me, Islands is a great song. It's a totally again like a major chord progression. It is sort of like a variation again of that beautiful melody of Tubular Bells. So it references the wind chimes part 1, right? In terms of the sonic qualities, the chords used. For me, you know that people say that major is happy and minor is sad and like stuff like that. For me, the song Islands is an incredibly sad song.
Yeah.
And I was so moved by it, so I could listen behind the cheesy instrumentation, let's say, and also the saxophone solo and stuff like that, which really so much of its time.
I think it's a beautiful solo. I think I don't have. Do you have like many people? Do you have a sort of an inner aversion to the saxophone in this kind of context?
In this kind of context, I would say probably yes, a little bit. But you see, like the choice to make that, to take Ralph Ravenscroft, who did the Baker Street solo. So they picked the people to make a hit, let's say, right? So that's what I don't like. So that's why I can see. And I remember hearing an interview with Mike at the time on the radio, really at that time, and he said he hates saxophone. He said that, I hate saxophone. He did say it, and it's really interesting. And yeah, then he used Courtney Pine on Heaven's Open, which is funny. Anyway, so so the lyrics are super sad for me.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this is not a love song in the traditional sense. It's actually we are islands.
Yeah,
but islands just never too far. I mean,
yes.
That is a very interesting look at relationships.
Yeah, and now we have to talk about the cover, which is sort of, again, kind of an ugly cover. But what about the symbolism? So, and this is why, I mean, the US cover, I really don't like that at all, because I think that nobody really, like, why would you put somebody else's hands onto Mike Oldfield cover? This is horrible. Right, but here this cover has this very small island, which looks like a tropical island, and the sea, the blue sea around it, with his hands photomontaged into it, and it's a sea of his hands, and I haven't thought about what that symbolism is. But I'm sure he intended something with that.
The cover does look a lot better if you have it on vinyl, if you have the vinyl in your hands.
Yeah.
Because it really, a third of the space is taken up by the sort of ugly upper
typography,
which for me the cover was really important in my appreciation. Like wanting to like this album because I picked it because of the cover, and I think it fits the wind chimes really well. And I agree, the American version, I think it's the American version, has this sort of, I think it's too abstract also. I think that fits neither. It's
like a stock photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can, you know, these kinds of, this imagery of the fingers and the hands like this makes an appearance in the wind chimes video. So there's a connection there for sure. Yeah, so just going back to Islands, the lyrics.
It's also part of the Balinese tradition. The Kachek actually.
Exactly. That's what. Yes, yeah. And remember that I forgot to make this connection on the Discovery inner sleeve cover. There are photographs, and there's one photograph of Mike in Bali. So you see, there's like a little bit of a connection because that must have been the time that he's already captured samples there, that he's recorded stuff there. Because yes, he's using samples of Balinese music in the wind chimes, for those who don't know. Okay, so the cover version we did of Islands, we tried to strip away anything that kind of like was distracting from the emotional, like from the sadness somehow. And we made this version, which I think is beautiful. I'll put a link in the description for that. So then Flying Start. Okay, so with.
By the way, can I ask you?
Yeah.
I was surprised how many people think this is the worst song Mike Oldfield ever recorded, Islands, and I was surprised how many people singled out Bonnie Tyler as being a bad fit. I don't usually like the kind of voice that she represents. I've never been a big Gianna Nannini fan, for example. But it's a personal preference.
Yeah.
But I think she's great on this track. And she actually, considering her voice, I think she sings it lyrically. She sings it understated, and I don't know. I love her performance. I mean, you research different versions as well. Do you think that is sort of a softer, more intimate voice yields a better, or like does it fit? I
really don't have so much of an opinion about that. Like say artistically, or let's say, obviously it's it's not my taste, I'd say, but I see it as this song as the result of executive decisions. So it's not a purely artistically free piece of music, like I said, with Ralph Ravenscroft and Bonnie Tyler to be on this song. So yes, I like the song the way it is. I like her performance. It moves me. It's also sort of a standout track for sure in his whole catalog. I think I can't say anything bad about it. But yeah, I think that you could have any great, let's say, singer-songwriter play this on acoustic guitar and sing it, and people would be extremely moved.
I agree.
Like really beyond Mike's reputation, where like a lot of people that would say Mike Oldfield, I don't like that guy, like because they don't know Mike. You could just have somebody else perform his songs and be incredibly moved. And this is one of these kind of songs.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, where people would cry when they hear it. And it's done, as you say, like it's sort of poetic and at the same time very direct. Funnily enough, have you heard the Cure album?
Yeah.
So, and obviously, like Robert Smith is the master of that kind of poetry. Like it couldn't be any simpler. But it's just great, and obviously this has nothing to do with Mike's lyrics. But in a way, like you see, like there's a sort of whatever, like innocence, maybe a different kind of innocence.
And there's actually a great Cure song called "Apart." How did we get so far apart? Which sort of also has, how did we get to be two islands?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Never made that connection though, but.
So I find probably all of these lyrics, well, all of them, I don't, like some of them are quite cryptic, but Flying Start, did you find your chateau in that Mediterranean fantasy? That was the time when British musicians started moving to Spain. And the Spain theme, like the bullfights and stuff like that, as it is represented in the video and everything like that whole vibe, that Spanish vibe, is in this record already. So even before we had the Ibiza and stuff in the mid-90s, I find it great that this is sort of like part of this record. And I liked, I remember...
Who is talking to who in that song, do you think? I always think it has to relate to something very specific with the wine and the chateau. I mean, Branson sort of lived in a chateau, but I don't think it's a reference to him.
No, I don't think so. I think it's a reference to Kevin Ayers.
Okay.
I think it's a song about Kevin Ayers.
He's singing about himself.
He's singing about the whole world, which was the band, or what was the band called? The band was called and the whole world. So I think the song is basically about this, and the Flying Start. The Flying Start is Mike's, maybe it could be Mike's start, actually, that he's like talking about the time with Kevin Ayers and the whole world. It also, like the theme of wine, so the alcoholism, and also that's also in the video. So it's a little bit about that as well. You lost your dream in a bottle of wine.
So maybe it's Ayers singing to Oldfield. Who knows?
So what the lines that I really like that give me goosebumps even now is, I knew you had to do it your way, fine, but there's none to carry the cross this time. So this is it's incredible, and I think it's deeply personal, and maybe it doesn't really matter who's talking to who. Also, it starts with we.
Yes.
The lyrics.
So that's maybe why your interpretation to say it is about the band, and maybe it's about Oldfield leaving the band and recreating Tubular Bells. You know, you had to do it your way. Kevin says to him, "Fine, but this time there's none to carry the cross." Who
Yes.
knows? Maybe it's. And Mike was, of course, a big Spain aficionado.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah, and let's continue. So North Point really is the one that has the.
I just wanted to maybe say that
okay.
that actually this song, Flying Start, which to many people who dislike the album, that's their favorite. To me, that one should really not have never been on the album. I really, really find it, and it's not the question of taste. I find it first of all, it's produced differently, notably differently than the other songs. So there's no way you can program the album differently and it would always stick out, I think.
Yes.
It's sort of, I don't know, I find
But
it...
that's also what makes it charming.
I suppose, not for me maybe, but I think a lot of my issues with the album they ask me, why do I like other things which are so similar to this, but I don't like this? So I'm a big fan of Heaven's Open, which another album which many people don't like. But you could argue that basically it's the same it's the same album, a very similar approach.
Oh yeah, sure, for sure.
But I love Heaven's Open. I think that's one of my absolute favorites, top 7 or 8 albums. And Islands, who knows, for whatever reason, I ask myself why. Not that it's.
It really doesn't matter.
I suppose it doesn't. But,
no, I think it's sort of like a charming, sort of self-referential song, and this is sort of what I really like about Mike's career, how he is able to. The name of the book he wrote, Changeling. So like it's incredible. Like how do you come up with such a song, like after you've written the Wind Chimes? Let's say it's really I find it super interesting just because of that, and that's why its inclusion here again. Like he had to make an album. He wanted to make an album. We don't know. Somebody pressured him to make an album, and if you think about it, like in the context of Islands, which is sort of like a completely fabricated, let's say, from the industry side, fabricated, Flying Start is the opposite of that.
Yes,
because Kevin Ayers wasn't a successful guy, so it was, and that's why I like the song. It's kind of charming, and I agree. Back in the day, also I didn't understand what does this song do, what reason to exist does it have on a Mike Oldfield record? But because it's the lyrics, and I remember some other detail. I think that there are backing vocals in the chorus, which sound like Phil Spalding to me. By the way, if that makes if anybody
definitely something must have been going on behind the scene because or behind the curtain because he did the songs with John Anderson before, and then there was apparently a recording of one of the songs with Fish of Marillion.
That was on Earth Moving.
That was for Earth Moving?
Yes.
Aha.
Yes.
Anyway, he seems, and there was sort of the people he was working with around that time. If you put them on one album, that would have been one big star-studded cast. But the result, Islands, the way it was published, doesn't have that at all, I think.
That's true. And, like from the list of contributors, we can see that Rick Fenn is even on there. So Rick Fenn is like one of the elements, let's say, that connects back to Crises and 5 Months Out, right? And like the inclusion of Phil Spalding as the person that Mike met for Crisis and Discovery, but on Discovery, these people were not active, not activated. So they basically skipped one generation of Mike Oldfield, and so it's 4 years, at least 4 years between those collaborations, let's say. And I know that Björn Jason Lind, he was introduced because of the ABBA connection, because Björn played on ABBA records. And I think I remember talking to Reuter, I think was his name. He was a manager at Virgin in the 80s. I met him at a studio like 15 years ago or so and talked with him about Mike. And he said that there's the record company made that connection, and Mike flew to, or Björn flew into Mike's studio to record these parts. Also Björn talked about it, but unfortunately I don't remember any details anymore. I mean, how did we get this here now? Back to the
the idea that it's not sort of this name dropping big cast album.
Yeah. No, it's not. And like some of these musicians, like we haven't had, and we don't even know which parts they played. Okay, Pierre Marlin and Benoit Marlin, they play the vibraphone, for sure. And Pierre Marlin may actually play drums. I was thinking could be like that he would actually play Flying Start or something like that simple thing, because that is the only song that seems like it was real drums.
Yeah. That was worked on a lot, from what I read. I think that song,
Flying Start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mike was apparently never happy with the initial version and then kept tweaking it.
Yeah. So anyway, do you want to go on to North Point, and like, because that's sort of cryptic. That's the one where I really don't really have any idea what it's about.
After North Star, we get into the North Point.
And Dance to the North Star. Which, you know, that unreleased single.
Yeah. I don't know what it's about. North Point, though, does exist. I should have invested more in this, but it's one of my favorite of the songs, and I always thought it didn't go on long enough. I think it would have been great with just 2 more minutes in some form added to it. I love Anita's voice, I like vocals on this one. Also, the way she pronounces some of the words, like north, I think it's...
Yeah, like sounds like Nord.
Nord or North, it's somewhere in between.
Yes.
Really, I think these things add to it, especially since it's North Point. Yeah. It's almost a synth track, in a way. It sounds almost...
Yeah, actually, The Time Has Come is the one that is most
clearly,
like a sequencer-based, synth-based track. But yes, I agree. It has kind of like I would say a cool vibe to it. Also, like the sound of Mike Strat, how he's finger picking those chords is it's very simple, but it's cool. Also, he's using a major chord with a major seventh in there, like, which is something that is also kind of like a rare occurrence. So there's like sort of like the movement of the bass note, I think, goes to E flat there, which is kind of like really interesting sonically. But it is the overall sound design which really makes the song. And I agree, the way the voice is produced is really cool.
Very nice.
Yes,
I would have actually guessed that if I didn't know it otherwise I would have thought that this is the Michael Cretu track, because just like Cretu liked the sort of airy voice of Zander and turned her into a star with that contrast of his powerful production and her sort of floating voice. It's similar here somehow. I think it's very interesting. I think maybe in a way Anita is more of the perfect voice for his songs, maybe even than Maggie Riley. I think maybe because Riley came from a soul and funk background, and then adapted to his.
Yeah, Anita's voice is even more European, let's say.
Probably.
Yeah, less soul.
Yeah.
You know, in a good way. and you know, like there's something here I want to point out about these lyrics for North Point and The Time Has Come. And what The Time Has Come is very obvious that it's sort of like a kind of religious, Christian religion-based idea, right? And here as well, because we get the word pray.
Yeah.
And that is the very first time, I think, that he is opened up as with some sort of like Christian religious verbiage, right? So I think that's kind of special for this album, because like later on we get a little bit more of that kind of thing, much later in his career.
That's true, and also, of course, the elements on the wind chimes on side A have this very strong spiritual connotation. Maybe there is a sort of
that's true, but you don't get the vibe of any Christian or like even the world music vibes. They don't point to a certain belief system, let's say. But here, like hearing the word, like obviously, pray is just could be neutral, you know, but. Anyway, it's sort of like a song about, you know, being left out or being in prison, or and sonically it's pretty much because we can still hear the Oberheim synth in it, and so it's sort of closely related to songs like Crystal Gazing, and in a way completely different song, different vibe, different groove, but sonically it really connects to that to the earlier 80s. Somehow.
Yeah. And later on Earth Moving, there's this song Blue Night, which also has a sort of this cool sort of silvery
yeah, I know what you mean, like the
quicksilvery sort of feeling.
Yes. But that song is more of, again, like a Moonlight Shadow
electronic version,
sibling somehow, right?
By the way, wasn't also Man in the Rain written as for the sessions to this album? I read somewhere that it was sort of written and
it was also, as far as I know, Barry Palmer who first, or even no, it was before that even. Man in the Rain was actually Moonlight Shadow times, so it was Crisis times.
Okay, that would have made it different.
Because there was Hazel O'Connor involved, right? I think that was Crisis. But anyway, like this is not an exact science at all, because we wish that this information would be available somewhere.
Yeah.
But not many people care so much about this. But any other fans who want to contribute and let us know what you know, because we don't know much.
When I think of this North Point, I also think about the way it transitions from the end of the chorus to the next verse. I think because the song is so untypical of Mike Oldfield, I think it puts a smile on my face when the guitar comes in and then it goes back.
Yeah, it goes from it's the major minor thing, which is again, and for those interested, the first time he used this sort of sequence where it's the 1, 2, 3 chord, and the 3 chord is major, is it's both in Poison Arrows and also in Talk About Your Life. And this same motif is used here in North Point.
Yeah.
And so because he ends on the 3 major, and then that 3 major becomes a minor chord, and it's the 1 of the verse. So it's really cool. It's really cool in that way.
I wish we had more of the sessions. Really, with this album, I really wish there were more of the sessions. Like, I think the wind chimes, certainly there must have been longer. What we get chunks of longer pieces. I would love to eavesdrop just a little bit. And with this one as well, is there a version where there's a solo at the end? For example, I would love to know, because it's very abrupt. And I think one of the feelings that I have with some of this...
I mean, there's a solo in it, which is playing the melody.
Yeah, exactly. Just wondering if...
Actually with a great sound. like a synth guitar sound, just amazing. Which also was the sound he used on Discovery, on the song Discovery.
But if you take Heavens Open, for example, that album, there's the second song on that. What's it called?
Which one is that? No Dream? Or?
Yeah, No Dream. So that one, for example, that really goes on into this long coda where choirs and him on his guitar. It just seems that this one, there's a concerted effort to keep the songs short and like radio friendly, if that's the
totally. I know what you mean. Yeah. Then we have Magic Touch. That's the song where the lyrics are really meaningless, or like meaningful in the sense that it seems like they were just written as an exercise to do something meaningless. But I don't know. I mean, it's only true lovers have the magic touch.
Well, I mean,
it kind of makes sense.
I agree. It's something to sing. You get something to sing, and then A Thief in the Night. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, I mean, like maybe it's a little bit about. I don't think we kind of have to take these things literally anyway. So if you think about Magic Touch, I'm pretty sure that people would say that about Mike, right? So maybe it's a little bit about that, not so much about like interpersonal relationships, but I don't know. Again, the word faith is in here. Anyway. And all that you touch seems to turn to gold. That's the line in there. So, which clearly was not the case for Mike. But then this song actually was pretty successful.
That one was successful, yeah.
Yeah. Which is funny because it never made any appearance here in Europe. I know Mike was on the TV, both in Germany and in Italy at least, where he performed 3 or 4 songs of the album as playback, like not a real performance, just miming. But Magic Touch was never actually, like presented here. While in the US it was a charting hit. Interesting.
I wonder. I mean, the situation back then, just very briefly to elaborate on that, was that I think he separated from his then partner just shortly before she gave birth, or around the time she gave birth to their child, and then the relationship with Anita became moved ahead with that relationship, and then I think they took some time before moving together. But I wonder if there's sort of a feeling of whether or not he was thinking about whether or not that whole situation was okay, whether he was wondering for himself, was that what is happening? Is that justifiable? Because now you mentioned the idea that the song Flying Start could also be about the band. I mean, if that's true, then that song would actually be someone singing at him, almost like he's almost as inviting someone else to not insult him, but to accuse him. And there's all of prayer and prisoner, I believe, and and the idea of
Yes, exactly. There's some reflection in there for sure. I mean, Men on the Rocks, that album, like it's clearly every single line in those lyrics because when you've read the autobiography, you can clearly say, okay, this line is about that event, blah blah blah. So there's always a little bit of self-reflection. So that's why I think that all of this makes, like, we haven't really looked at, when we talked about Discovery, we didn't really look at the lyrics.
Not that much,
but it's already there. things like that. Um, yeah, I've just I was quiet because I was reading these lyrics here again. Um, okay, time has come. Actually, I think a beautiful piece of music with a great, most simple melody, but again, totally uniquely Mike Oldfield with an octave jump in the melody. Beautiful. Most simple, like 3 chords kind of thing. And it's produced nicely. I mean, I think in the 80s, pretty much so, you had producers, because a producer had mastered a certain production technique. And I don't know how this came. Michael Cretu was actually, or Michael, or whatever, he's Romanian, right?
Yep.
Originally, was associated with Virgin Records,
Yeah.
I think. And actually, like, the connection with King Crimson we have here actually is that Richard Palmer James, who wrote the lyrics for King Crimson between 72 and 74, also wrote the lyrics for some Michael Cretu productions, interestingly enough. So, like,
I have to say, I'm Dirk and me, my brother and me, were big Cretu fans, actually, in terms of his production work. But I can definitely say that in terms of the lyrics, he needed the help.
yes. That's funny. Yeah, but it's got this really beautiful, like how would you say, like fluid, pearly kind of sequencer programming on this. Like, we don't know if Michael did that. Any one of the Michaels did it. Mike or Michael did it. We don't know. But I wish that this song would have could use a slightly better mix. I think that the extended version on the 12-inch had a slightly different mix. I think, like, as always, like, there are so many details and like little elements in the parts. It would be great to have a multi-track of this and break down and look at all the things that go on under the hood, right? Things that get lost. And like in The Time Has Come, for me, is really, it's sort of the Christmas song, I think. Like, the child was born to be a king, For me, that's, I guess, Jesus, right? So
Yep. Some of the other references don't quite match. It sounds like a Christmas song. I mean, the entire aesthetic of that song is clearly meant to be.
And on my album, on my Christmas album Comet, I covered this song as an ambient song, where I layered the melody like many times, and then it disintegrates through a tape delay over 10 minutes or so. And I just love this melody. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's a very unusual. I mean, it's instantly different from anything that you would hear on the radio.
Yes.
I suppose the mix would have been on Cretu. I think so, because the big masterpiece of Cretu is the second Enigma album, and I think he's at his best when he's working with samples. And that was the 90s. The early 90s was when he was really getting to his at his peak. And there's also a Sandra album from that time, which has a cover version of Nights in White Satin. That entire album is amazing. Sounds amazing.
I've never heard any of his music. I mean, like, obviously the Sadness or whatever.
So that album was huge for me, and the second album was huge for my brother. When I found out that
did Mike ever appear on his records?
I think there's one or two songs where I think is that him playing, but the credits don't say so. It's really weird. I really wonder what they would have been talking about. I mean, I definitely know that they had they had similar interests around that time. So you see that Songs of Distant Earth is sort of
Yeah, like an enigma thing. Yeah. Yes.
Actually, it's very different and it's incredible in its own right. But there are also the videos. There was sort of a hint at Enigma, and I can sort of see that they both have very sort of traditional values as well. I know Cretu in the later part of his career, where things didn't, where he also went into a sort of a lull, the career, and he was very disillusioned with the state of production and that people weren't sort of putting enough attention and effort into it. I think he's definitely someone who thinks very deeply about production and is a perfectionist. And and I think they were both interested in the technology aspect of it. It's just that from a musical point of view...
wasn't Cretu in Ibiza at that point already?
Yes. So they maybe they just both liked the good life.
Yeah.
That could have been. I mean,
It's interesting. So it's it's not only Kevin Ayers, with Spain. It's also Michel Cretu from the Flying Star reference.
Yeah, that's why it was confused. And a lot of the interviews you can find from the 80s are on Spanish TV.
Yes.
They're not
but that's also because Mike was a huge star there. Yeah.
He was also a big star in France, but there's less.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the albums sold really well in Germany and France and Spain. Maybe that's his main touring area. I don't know. You know this better than I do. I don't know. Did he actually tour islands? He mentioned he announced it in an interview.
Yes, but it never happened. So something really, and that's why I think there is some sort of emotional mix-up somehow at that time that that may be the reason why the album isn't available. I don't know. I remember that they were talking about having a band, and there are a few people that I've talked to that were already in talks about going on tour with this at this time. But yeah, really, I do want to just make sure that we research. Like, if we can, we should really talk to people who were around at that time to find out some things that are just mysterious. I spoke with Ant a couple times, and he mentioned few very interesting things about this time. So if you go on, on my podcast, you can listen to those. Anyway, I mean, the Nights on Fire is very, very, has super cool chord progressions there, like the instrumental parts of that song. The song itself is simplistic in a way. It has the When the Night's on Fire chorus, which also actually, funnily enough, here in the lyric sheet is in the song Islands, When the Night's on Fire is listed as the chorus. So it's one other song, let's say, where it's really questionable what actually is the verse, what is the chorus, and I like that. It's cool. So, but When the Night's on Fire, When the Night's on Fire is the chorus, and the verses are, very simplistic, like 2-chord thing. But then there are these instrumental parts which have the most beautiful modulations, the most beautiful chord sequences, like just so fantastic, kind of not lifted, but kind of similar to some of the things that happen in the Wind Chimes Part 2, but I kind of concentrated. Beautiful. And it's a variation on the Islands theme. It's incredible, like beautiful, and it's sort of the kind of stuff that as a musician you want to study these kinds of melodies and chord changes and stuff. It's a beautiful song. It's interesting that it was, for me, it was part of the album from the very beginning, because I bought the CD. It was actually the second CD I ever bought. First CD I bought was Incantations. Then I bought Islands a few months later, not having a CD player. I think I mentioned that already before. But yes, it was part of the album for me from the very beginning. It was interesting to see that it was not included in the US edition or on the vinyl, obviously for space reasons, I guess. We haven't talked so much. I mean, we have talked a lot now, but we haven't talked so much about the wind chimes.
Yeah, so the next hour.
Will be about the wind chimes part. But really, let's just say it's really worth checking out. It's a very complex, beautiful melodies. Just a beautiful, super complex composition and mix. And
I wanted to maybe add one thing before we get to it about the production, because I researched this. One of the things which is notably different on Islands compared to anything before and then anything after, I think, Earth Moving, when it changes actually, probably after Heavens Open, it's notably more compressed and louder than anything before. It's really notable. It's 2 to 3 points on the dynamic range meter, less dynamic than Discovery. And that probably also fits in with the idea that it was meant to be a hit record. It's mastered hot, really hot, and which means that the loud, sort of the emotional climaxes, which are so rousing on many of his earlier ones, they're not quite as distinct from the quieter moments. I think you mentioned it would have been great to have the multi-tracks. I think it would have been great to have a more dynamic mastering of this one. I think it would add incredibly to the wind chimes, especially because there are sections in there which are just insanely beautiful and quiet. And I think they would contrast even more. But anyway, I think one of the reasons I didn't take to it as much is because I'm really sensitive to more compressed sound. And I think this one really is notably louder. And it changes again. Funnily enough, in the 90s, most bands were getting louder and using more compression to make it even more punchy. And actually, his albums get more dynamic again. So Tubular Bells 2 is actually, although recorded half a decade later, more dynamic than this one. It's really, to me,
yes. I mean, I know what you mean. This really, and I said that before, is a record that is really taking advantage. I mean, it's the wind chimes, the first side.
Yeah.
That is really taking advantage of whatever Dolby C or whatever noise reduction it was, so you could push things more. And it's a very clear sound, very detailed, and yeah, I mean, I guess more compressed. But in a way, I think he makes up for that in the tension and release of the music. So to me, it doesn't feel. I mean, I guess you're right with what you're saying, but to me, it feels like the technology and the composition, they go hand in hand here.
Absolutely.
And that's also why I think sonically this is one of the great sounding records of that time. Even Earth Moving is sort of, in a way, you could say a shitty record, but the sound is kind of fascinating.
No, I think Earth Moving is actually neither shitty nor a bad sound.
I think the sound of that time is great, because it was that period where digital and analog technology were coexisting, where the analog was coloring the sound, but the digital technology was not coloring the sound that much yet, but it was coloring the compositional approach.
That's totally true. Definitely. I mean, in a way, it's the question: Did he make it punchier because he could, because the composition was allowed it, or did he edit the piece and arrange it in a way because the compression because there was an idea to make it more punchy? We don't know, but there's definitely a very close relationship between the two.
Yes.
Yeah, let's talk about the wind chimes. I mean, so the wind chimes actually, again, if you read comments from people on the web, it's mostly say, oh, this is just sort of a fluff piece. It's new age sounds and so forth. I think really most people don't understand what is happening in this piece. I think, to me, the wind chimes, the only thing I can say against it is that, again, the Tubular Bells references, so it's sort of conceptually, I think, really, but that is just, I mean, once you're in, all of that gets forgotten. And I think, in fact, it's one of the pieces where the craftsmanship of it is so good that it turns into an artistic element. It's so incredibly genially constructed.
Yes.
And maybe constructed is actually the wrong word.
Executed.
Yes. That it takes on a hyper, it gets on a different level. And if you actually, this is maybe something I would recommend, if you take a piece of paper and you put down the sections and you get a better understanding of the arrangement and then listen to it again without the notes, I think you get a different experience. And it's one of the pieces where you get in and it channels you through to the other side, and it's like it washes over you. And
it's like funny. It's one of the only pieces where he's sort of, I would even say it this way, heavy-handedly, how do you say, weaves the main tune into almost every section, which is da, 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 right? Yep. So that fanfare-like thing, which is the wind chimes part 1, and you hear it with like a horn-like sound in the background of most sections, also in like the most bizarre rhythmic kind of alterations. And funnily enough, I can see that the wind chimes maybe is a piece of music that inspired me a lot, because the piece Face I recorded with Pat Mastelotto is kind of like a brother to the wind chimes part 2. In terms of like the idea,
it's
like
a bit
the
longer though, isn't it?
It's 35 minutes long, yeah. But still, it's very much that idea to simply massage things in such a way that they work. So which allows for a very, like I said, it allows for a very intuitive, as well at the same time very meta view on things. And that's kind of what is happening in that composition. And as you say, like we have the acoustic elements in there. We have great guitar sounds, great guitar playing, and you have Simon Phillips playing drums, and not just drum kit, but there is some tom work in some sections, which is just extraordinarily great. Yeah. And I also mentioned that before. We have like the time signatures actually following the music rather than following the melodies. So there are things where you have like a bar 7/8 inserted somewhere suddenly into something which would be 4/4, or at the end the wind chimes theme on the vibes at the very end. It's in 13, I think, or something like that. So there are things that he like even started exploring that he hadn't done before. It's ridiculous if you say like, okay, like in Incantations there was a lot of 11/8, and now here we have one section which is actually in 13/8, and there's no other section in his music in 13/8 whatsoever. But there's a lot of 15 already on Tubular Bells, and now 15 makes an appearance here as sort of like a swing kind of thing. And it's really interesting, like how he started. And I remember there was a video from the time which was in a German magazine where they show him in the studio with where he's sitting in front of his Atari ST computer with the notator software in the background. And I remember that back then with my friend George, we stopped that frame and we transcribed the melody from the screen. we were not able to identify what it is, but it's like we were so obsessed about it.
I think probably you said it's an important album. Probably if you took Mike's career path and you plotted it out on a sort of a piece of paper on a heavy cardboard, and you had to put it like almost, or if it were a record, sort of, I think the middle point, like the what's it called, the center point, would be this album.
It's the fulcrum, like actually,
in a way, because it
is.
It has the compositional, it has elements of traditional compositional technique he used before, and there's elements of Tubular Bells, obviously, in there. Very small references to Up and Down in the Quiet, but there's the vibraphone is very incantations-like, and then it hints at the future, as you said. It makes it sort of a, maybe it's like a finger exercise, maybe for what would become Amarok. Very proficient.
Yes, and let's not forget that theme, the wind chimes theme, is one of the main themes in Amarok.
Sort of it, yeah. And if you look, because I think, as I said, I think many people don't realize
what this album doesn't have, I would say it doesn't have at all, is that folk stuff that was so present in most of his albums, up to Discovery, where the guitar solos are folk guitar solos, even the electric guitar solos, they speak that language. And here, that element is, I would say, completely gone, with the exception of, funnily enough, the song Islands.
Yes.
Where they have stripped away all of these elements in this version that was released. But that is, and that is the funny about the cover version I did with Lee, is that we put all that back in. We put the Irish pipes back in, and the Boran rhythms and stuff like that. But that in a way that you're absolutely right. This would be the sort of like the midway point of his career somehow. I haven't counted like which number of album, like is this his 8th album or whatever, I don't know.
Well, the first 4, then QE2, 5 Miles Out, Platinum. Sorry, I forgot that one. So we have 8. No, I think there's a few more coming, but
yes. So anyway, it is.
Anyway, I was going to say also that if you look at the state, I think even though this one has a lot of acoustic instruments, the arrangement to sort of the process of arranging it goes from the paper to the digital console. So it is arranged in a way and edited in a way which is.
I think it's these must have been digital templates.
Yeah.
So like prepared in the computer, and then so demos in the computer which were laid down on tracks and then overdubbed and replaced.
That's the way I think that people would only start thinking about making music a lot later. If you look at Tangerine Dream, for example, what they did around this time, it sounds entirely out of date. It sounds very dated today, and it doesn't sound progressive or modern at all at the time. I think this one sounds so much more still relevant, and it sounds it has aged so much better than the late Tangerine Dream stuff, whereas Tangerine Dream was the archetypal electronic band. And I think that is so interesting to me, is that this piece it has sort of because it is so influenced by the past and it looks so much into the future, it is super modern in a way.
Oh yeah. And where Taurus 2, 5 Miles Out, is sort of like the ultimate progressive rock piece in a way, kind of like in all sorts of ways. This, the Wind Chimes, Part 1 and Part 2, is sort of like the progressive electronica piece in a way. Before there was electronic dance music. Yeah. So it's a really interesting phase in the development of music. This mid 80s to late 80s, I really think so. And before grunge happened, everything there was like where like prog still played a role. Funnily enough, in grunge, prog made a reappearance, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Like the rock element of prog made a. But yeah, I really think this is. You're absolutely right. I never thought about it that way. That this album is really a key central element, which makes it even more interesting, like that is not available.
Yes.
It's it's wacky. I guess we've talked a lot of a long time here, and I think there's a lot more. Do you have anything left on your list?
So I have a question, and I have maybe a comment about the wind chimes. Just one thing I noticed: I've often asked myself, what makes this piece so different? So, in many respects, Music from the Balcony shares, I think, the approach and the Amarok. It's sort of it's a different way of editing the music, and they share this. And then after Amarok, maybe Tubular Bells too, maybe that, and then something different happens, and he goes into another direction again. But I think why this one is standing out is maybe because of the reverb, or for whatever reason. I think one of the things which is different here is that there are short breaks. Sometimes he uses very almost imperceptible breaks between sections. They don't always cleanly like go from one section to the next. And it creates a sort of, and then other passages do transition directly. And then there are also longer passages which where things just flow into each other. And it creates a combination of a sort of a more scenic idea, which is on Music from the Balcony, which is really just where you could take one piece and put it somewhere else. And he actually does that verbatim. And he creates an illusion of a band performance, combining it with sort of an electroacoustic idea where you go between things which don't have any reference to each other. And I think that is what the magic of this. And even when I didn't like it as much as I do now, I always wanted to go back to this piece. I've always had this piece got me going back to it again and again. And I think it's because of this. There's a different pulse behind it, a different feeling, these breaks, and I don't know.
Yeah,
it's something I just noticed, and I was wondering, do you think there's a logic in the way it's arranged, or is it sort of it just because it fits together? But I've thought about this a lot and looked at the schedule, sort of the arrangement plan. It's not like.
I mean, it's. Again, I don't know exactly, but it's very deliberately put together, and you can tell that the last few sections are very consciously drawing the themes of and on the album together. Like everything is being referenced. It is a meta statement about the album itself and about his career up to that point. I really think it is. So that's why it is pretty much constructed. Yeah, it's impossible for me to say where the melodic, like, I think the strength always with Mike is the melodies, and I would say again that this album gives us a new kind of approach to melody. And this is ridiculous for me even to talk about this as a musician or composer myself. Like, how can somebody who is one of the greatest melody writers for me, right, and come with a new album, write great melodies again, but the melodies are nothing like the ones that he had before. Like where you say, like he's using different kinds. Suddenly he's using different kinds of intervallic combinations that he hasn't done before. Like the wind chimes with the major 6 interval, right? It's really special. And it gives right, like this, like even like these jumping the ranges and stuff like that. I don't know. It moves me. It moves me to see that there is an artist who keeps the high quality of his work and still manages to uncover in a pretty limited field like melodies, right? It's really difficult to write new melodies and to come up with these amazing solutions. And as you say, these sections sometimes they flow into each other, and sometimes there's a sort of like a fermata somewhere.
Yeah, that's the
and and then you mentioned the reverb. Yes, where there's delay and reverb that kind of like makes that last note ring out, and then it resolves into that next section, sort of like as an emotional resolve as well as a musical flow resolve. It's very much like that piece. Also, it is, as far as I remember now, looking back at his whole catalog, the first time that he's using some sort of sound effects in where you have in the video for the wind chimes, you have the jet fighters, like the planes, like flying, the jets flying, and you hear the sound of the. You hear them, and they're in the music.
There's lots of flying in the video, by the way, which also, of course, a clear reference.
Yeah, and I love the fact that the strat, like the flying strat.
I love
it's so ridiculous.
The flying bones at the beginning of the 2001 reference.
Yes, the flying bones, and that's London, right? The city that
flying London,
over the Thames. It's just such a cool. It's such a rich period of his output. Just this album and the video has so much to give, and like people being dismissive of it is ridiculous. I think it really is ridiculous. This is very much. This album is very much in the league of with the instrumental side with Taurus 2 and Crisis, the tracks. So I think it's. I'm glad we got to talk about it. There's more on your list.
No, actually, I just I think probably with this one, I think this is going to stay in a state of wonder, that first side, because I do know that it has a sort of a turning point in the middle where there's a very short piano where the piano goes alone.
That's the one that I was just singing.
And then that sort of divides it into two sections. I just find that with this one, really, the more I listen to it, the more I wonder. Whereas the B-side, I don't know, I don't think I'm ever gonna really love it. And it doesn't necessarily get better. I think in a way, you can wonder that for an album which was from the record company side of view, probably intended to be an effort to go big, starts with the big instrumental, 20-minute instrumental. And maybe that's where he put his foot in. Maybe that's sort of the idea is, no, we're not going to start with the accessible material. We're going to start with what I have to say.
Yeah, but that's just a repeat of what he did with Five Months Out and Crisis.
Crisis, I still think, and that's actually what he's writing in the book as well, I think he didn't know that before Crisis that it was going to be that successful. I think he was still, the record company and him was still trying to emulate Tubular Bells. And then, of course, the single got to be a big success. And then it got reversed. And then suddenly the songs were at the heart of the matter. So Discovery has the weird instrumental piece on the B-side, sort of tucked away and also truncated in a way that it's only 12 minutes long.
Actually, you just pointed out something really that the variation of Tubular Bells that he used as Crisis is very close to the Tubular Bells to the theme in the wind chimes.
Yeah, you can make a great album out of Crisis side A and wind chimes side B. That would be a fantastic.
Yes. And I mean, like one other like off-putting part of this album is the wind chimes part 1, because it was purely arranged with in the computer with samples, which was like trying to mimic a symphonic orchestra, which doesn't work. It doesn't. I mean, it's hard to. Yeah. It's really super, and it actually was dated then. It just didn't work. So that's why I said that I wish I could have skipped it on the CD, and just go to part 2. Anyway, like as a composition, as a musical statement, great. I totally get what he was trying to do. It's sort of the overture to Tubular Bells, as in wind chimes, right? Is the part 1, which, and we mentioned that before as we were talking about Tubular Bells and Tubular Bells 2. Tubular Bells 2, before the main tinkly pattern starts, we have an intro. Right? Yeah. And that is so that intro is here, the Wind Chimes Part 1, it's that same idea.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just longer here. It's like like a single length composition, whatever, it's 3 minutes, but we can't even
It's
see
actually
here.
2.5 just.
Okay.
It's that was always weird to me, the idea that you have part 1 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, and then the second part 19 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder why he didn't shell out for the like an orchestra session for the first
Yes.
one.
No, I think I mean, I don't know, but again, I think he was interested in seeing if he could do something like it with the technology available. So it was sort of research, I think, and given that, it's sort of cool. Also, like like he's using like sample timpanis in that Wind Chimes Part 1, which then reappear in The Time Has Come. So even there, like there are like cross references between these tracks. Okay, I guess I've tried to stop this conversation a
Yes,
few
but you're
times
absolutely
already.
right. And that's probably a good point. This is a good point. I mean, as you said, maybe it's also because I hadn't listened to it for a while, and then a month ago I started listening to it again and again, and that's when I said, okay, now we have to go back to the studio and start talking again, because the music was calling to me, as it were.
Yes.
And it's a great thing, I think, when you leave it, when there's so much to talk about. I really, in my mind, I sometimes thought, when we finished the Mike Oldfield podcast project, maybe we should do something similar around someone like Klaus Schulze,
Yes.
whom we also both love. But there's never, ever going to be as much to talk about one album by Klaus Schulze as we have to talk about even one of his lesser appreciated works of Mike Oldfield. I think that's absolutely fascinating.
Feels to me like this is the longest podcast we've ever done on the Mike Oldfield record, right?
Close to 2 hours, yes.
Yeah. So there you go. I'm glad, and talking about it, I can see how much I love it, how much it means to me, and it's entirely personal thing. And I'm glad that there are some other fans that appreciate these conversations. And as I've said before, please get in touch, send us your comments and your, like you may know things. Okay, shall we say goodbye for now?
We will.
Okay, tschüss, bye.
Tot ziens.